You know the drill. Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to True Talk Tuesday, where we give you the real deal on real estate. My name's Shalisa, and I am a real estate agent here in Polk County, Florida, and I work for S&D Real Estate Services. If you're here, let me know that you're here. Say hello in the comments. We are going to continue our HOA event. I don't know what you're going to call this, but we were talking last week about HOAs, and we were talking about common things that we know about HOAs, maybe common misconceptions that we have about HOAs. And last week there was a question that I did not know, and that's okay. I'd rather say I don't know and find you the answer than give you a wrong answer. So last week the question was, who supervises the HOA board? And I have never lived in an HOA, like full disclosure. I have never lived in an HOA. The house that I'm living in right now, I have literally lived in since I was about 23, 24. 24. I was 24, yeah. Since I was 24 years old. And that's over 20 years ago. So I have lived in this house. I have a half acre. It is in the middle of, not even middle of the country, but it's kind of rural, right? So we don't have HOAs out here. I deal with all kinds of things from neighbors, and that's okay. That's the trade-off, right? Because HOAs will prevent certain things, and I don't want an HOA because I want to have a huge Halloween display in my front yard, right? Right. Gail's here. Gail's here. We were talking about Gail and the little kitty heart on Sunday. Some friends of ours, and we were all getting together and talking about that. I thought that was cute. Gail speaks to me in memes, y'all. All right, just so you know, she speaks to me in memes. But like I said, I got the answer. Interesting. This took me down a rabbit hole that I loved, by the way, because as a former teacher, I am a fan of lifelong learning. So anytime you guys can give me a question that'll stump me, that makes me happy, right? Because I'm having to learn. So the question was, who supervises an HOA board? By the way, when I say like I went down a rabbit hole, like I've got papers upon papers upon papers over here that just like I kept printing stuff off. And then I'd go to my little Google Docs and I'd start making the notes so that way I'd have them in front of me. I'm a nerd. It's okay. It's all right. We know this, all right? So, answer is actually no single agency actually uh, not dictates, police. I'll use the word police. No single agent actually dictates or polices the HOAs, right? So how do they have guidelines? How do we know as consumers and people who are buying into an HOA? How do we know that they're not going to just randomly decide something on a whim, right? Well, let's talk about it. First, HOA boards are not supervised day to day by the state. In Florida, HOA boards are self-governed nonprofit corporations. Self-governed nonprofit corporations. They are not overseen like condominiums. Condominiums have a different, so we're just talking about single family homes right now, okay? No state department that reviews every decision. They don't have any regulators sitting in the back doing board meetings. None of that, right? So how do they get checked? How do we make sure that they're not making up things? Well, the first things first is when you go to buy a home that's in an HOA, you're going to have the opportunity, like I said last week, to read the HOA guidelines, right? And those HOA guidelines are called CCRs, right? They're covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Let's see if I remember that right. They are like the bylaws, right? That you are agreeing, hey, look, I am A-OK with not having signs in my yard, right? I am A-OK with all the mailboxes being the same. They give you that, and you see these are what we are going to abide by in this particular community, right? So first, if you don't agree with that document, don't buy in that community, right? Just don't buy in that community. That's simple, right? So the other thing is Florida law. I said we don't have the state policing them and looking day to day, right? I said that. But there is a Florida law, Chapter 720, HOA guidelines, and that limits how boards enforce rules. It limits how meetings and votes are held. It limits how money is handled and how fines and hearings work, right? State law always overrides HOA documents every single time, all right? So that's that. We will be talking about Chapter 720, by the way, a little bit later. I'm going to tell you up front, I'm almost guaranteeing this is not going to be 30 minutes tonight. It is literally probably 45 minutes to an hour. I'm going to try to keep it 45 minutes. I'm trying not to go over, because I know that's a long time to talk about HOAs, and nobody wants to hear that long, right? Nobody is that like, I want to hear everything. They're not that nerdy like me, all right? It's my job to be this nerdy. So I'm going to try to make it succinct for you and we can get through it. But I will be talking about Chapter 720 throughout this, so that way we get to know that a little bit better. Third way that HOA is kind of put in its place is homeowners, all right? This is a big layer. Homeowners elect the board, can recall board members, can vote on amendments, can attend meetings, and can run for the board themselves, right? So an HOA board answers to its members, not the other way around, right? The HOA is there to give the homeowners what they want, right? They have a fiduciary responsibility to the homeowners. And what does that mean? That means it is their purpose to look after what you want, right? Again, that first time when you were buying this home, you were given these rules, right? And you're like, 100% love this, right? So it's their responsibility to make sure that those rules are followed because you said you like them. If they have a rule that they're going to come up with, it's got to be voted on by the community, right? And if the community doesn't want it, it doesn't get put in. So there's that. That's another reason why if you are in an HOA community and they say, oh, we're voting on such and such, vote, all right? Vote anyways, but vote any chance you get to vote, whether that's politically, whether that's for homes, vote, all right? Don't just sit back and complain about the rule if you never put your 2 cents in about it, all right? Gail's got the cat with popcorn. She is invested in this one. Me at the HOA meetings watching the homeowners give it to the HOA. So, homeowners actually, if they feel that they are going overboard, right? The HOA has, in fact, stepped over the line. There is the courts. The courts are the enforcement mechanism. If a board violates Chapter 720, enforces rules illegally, acts outside of its authority, or breaches fiduciary duty, right? A homeowner can take them to court. Why? Because these rules are in place to keep the market value of your home. So the market value of your home does not depreciate. You have now, if one of these rules are broken and now you see market value going down because of this, say like your HOA has a rule about paint. We talked about this, and you've got a green, like the next door neighbor decides to do like neon green house, and the HOA isn't enforcing the rule, you can take the HOA to court because it is decreasing the market value of your home, right? So it's a civil case. You can do that. Judges do not care about HOA feelings, by the way. They care about documents and laws. So if it is a document, if it is law, they don't care about your feelings either. If you say, well, it's making me feel like nobody likes me because they're always against me. That documents and laws, all right? That's why it's important to know Chapter 720, and it's also important to know your HOA guidelines if you're in a HOA guidelines. Attorneys and fiduciary duty. Board members have fiduciary duty to act in good faith and in the best interest of the association. Remember, if they abuse power, mismanage funds, or act recklessly, they can be personally named in lawsuits. Their actions can be overturned and the association can be held liable, right? That risks quite but powerful things, all right? And then we also have the Department of the Business and Professional Regulations, the DBPR. Like real estate agents that's part of our regular regulations. The people that oversee us is the DBPR. I get my license through them. Does not oversee HOAs the way it oversees condo associations. They don't. However, HOA management companies, community association managers are licensed. Like I said, I'm licensed through the DBPR. They are also licensed through DBPR. So if the problem is the manager, there is a regulatory body that can actually take care of the manager. If the problem is the board, the remedies are legal and member driven. All right. So if it's a single person in the HOA, then that is where the DBPR can come in, right? But if it is the HOA as a whole, then we have to take it a different route. What does this mean in real life? See, I told you I was breaking this down. I was trying to make this so succinct for you. What does this mean in real life? It means HOA boards are powerful but not untouchable. They're not. I love A Bug's Life. All right, the movie A Bug's Life, because A Bug's Life, it shows us that when there are more people caring for one thing, more people caring about change than the people that are in power, we can make change happen. So if you have an HOA that isn't behaving the way you want. I don't know how I want to. I'm trying to word this, and my brain's like, what's the best way of saying this so that way we don't hurt anybody's feelings? And I might have to just say this so we don't. I'm gonna hurt some people's feelings. If an HOA is being dictators and not actually doing what the members want, the members can band together and take action, and that's what this is about. All right. So, grounding truth. HOAs work best when boards remember who they serve. They serve the community, right? How homeowners stay informed. So again, it's important that you're staying up to date with what the HOA is doing, and you vote when they have a new amendment. If they say, hey, we're going to say everybody has to have purple mailboxes from now on. Y'all want purple? There's going to be people in your community that love the color purple, right? Love that. Yeah, let's do it. Let's color that. I want my mailbox purple. And you don't, all right? Let's put a vote. I guarantee there's less people like me who want purple mailboxes. Like, I want a purple mailbox, but there might be like 3 other people on the whole community. So there's 4 of us, right? And there's 90 of you. But only 3 of you vote? Guess who's getting a purple mailbox? You didn't vote, okay? So make sure that you're staying on top of your HOA. What are they doing? What are they saying? What's coming out about your HOA? Let me turn my speaker off over here. So make sure that when you look at things that are happening to you, say the HOA comes to you and says, hey, you need to repaint your house. You might not be able to afford to repaint your house. I get it, right? But the truth is that the house has to be repainted, and this was a rule. One of my favorite sayings is, a fact is a fact, right? A fact is a fact. And your feelings about that fact do not change that fact. And the fact is, you signed a document saying that you would keep the appearance of your house up, right? And you would make sure it's repainted if there is visible flakes. Well, the HOA comes by and they say, hey, look, we see that it's flaking off. You've got to repaint it. Fact is a fact. Now, if the HOA comes by and goes, you know, it's fading. The paint is fading. But it's still that color. It's still the color, right? So then you could go in front of the board and kind of go, it's not taking away, it's not what they think it is. This is an objective view. So you can talk about it, all right? Okay. HOA boards are not supervised like a government. So we're recap, all right? HOA boards are not supervised like government agencies. They are supervised by laws, the documents that the homeowner signs, and the homeowners who elect them. You are electing these HOA board members. When those three stay engaged, HOAs behave. Okay? They cannot wake up one day willy-nilly and decide something. You have had to vote on it. All right? And if you are not staying on top of what's going on, and a vote has happened and you did not know. Now, they do have to make very reasonable accommodations to let you know, and I think we're going to talk about that later. I wrote a lot of stuff down. A lot of stuff down. But they do have to let you know when a vote is coming up. Most will send a letter to the homeowner so the homeowner understands. See. All right. Let's talk about Florida HOA Law, Chapter 720. I told you I was going to talk about this because this one is good to know. As I started reading up through it, and I went, wow, like, I think knowing this, it would kind of assuage some of the worries that new homeowners have about HOAs. Like, one of my husband's big thing is like, okay, so we're okay with the HOA now, but 2 years down the road, the board members change, and they're asked that we have all these rules that we didn't want. Again, they can't create rules, and that's some of the things that we're going to talk about with the 720. Right now, I know I've got a few people in here, so I need you to tell me hello. Just say hi. Don't be a lurker. Don't be a lurker. Just say hi. Few notes before we get into the Chapter 720, because that can be... One, grab your drink, hydrate. I'm trying to stay hydrated. Trying, all right? I'm supposed to drink 2 of these a day. We're not going to talk about if I drank those yet tonight. I did an open house this Saturday, by the way. I know I talked about it last Tuesday that I was going to do it. I did. Sarah Stiegler and I, you guys know Sarah she's been on the show before. She's my lender friend that comes in and talks all the time. So we did the open house at 3201 Oak Tree Lane. See, I do it every time. I doubt myself. Oak Tree Lane in Winter Haven. It is a golf community of Cypress Woods, and we had a blast. So when you get a chance, go to my Facebook and look at some of the pictures of us just elfed out, right? Sarah had a really cool game that she brought over. She created it for her own children. It is a claw machine, like an advent claw machine. Super cute. Super cute. It looks like a gingerbread house. So when you get a chance, go over to my Facebook. All right. Did everybody get your drink? Yep. I hate water. Hate water. Hate it. All right. So, Chapter 720. See? We've got notes here. Can we tell that, like, one, I used to be an English teacher. Like, look how this is broke down. All right, guys? Look at this. I'm a nerd. I am such a nerd. Gail's got her drink. She's got her snackies. Let's do this. All right, y'all. All right. So, what is Chapter 720? Chapter 720 of the Florida Statutes is the Homeowners Association Act. It is the state law that governs how HOAs must operate in Florida. Think of this as the guardrails. All right? My mom used to say that children needed at least one parent in their life because children liked guardrails. And every time I hear the word, I think of that. And I think about this is what a guardrail should be, right? We need to walk up a winding staircase and have at least one security. So Chapter 720 is that security as we walk up an HOA winding staircase. Gail, thank you. I feel like a hot mess today, but thank you. I went down the rabbit hole. All right, just saying. All right. HOAs can create rules, but Chapter 720 decides what is legal, fair, and enforceable. That last one, enforceable. Oh yeah, Trish? Let me know. I would love to sit in on one. Why? For learning purpose, for research purposes only. Okay. So, in order to also understand Chapter 720, we also need to talk about CCRs, that covenant, condition, and restrictions, right? What does that mean? What does that stand for? These are legally binding rules of a community. Legally, because you've signed that paperwork saying you understood, right? Legally binding rules of a community. Key facts are recorded with the county, automatically applied when you buy the home, and run with the land. So it's not just the property, and this is where some people, for other situations, get confused. Property and land in certain situations can be separated. So like if you have an HOA and a mobile home community, you are renting the land, but the property is yours, like the home is yours. So in those cases, even though you're renting the land, it still applies to you. All right. It's not the owner of the land. It is your problem. So that's why they say runs with the land as well. Override most other HOA rules if there is a conflict. So we'll get into that. I'll explain that in a minute. All right. CCRs control the big picture of how the neighborhood functions and how properties are used and maintained. All right. Again, we're going to come back to they have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that your home keeps its market value and it increases in market value, right? That is a fiduciary responsibility they have to the homeowners. So any rule that they put in here has to say, basically keep that, right? It has to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. All right. CCRs basically say what owners can and cannot do, their maintenance responsibilities, the use of community areas and the restrictions of community areas, and enforcement authority. All right. Bylaws, how are the HOA? So bylaws and CCRs are different. Okay. CCRs, maintenance, use and restrictions, and enforcements. Right. Bylaws are how the HOA operates. Board elections, voting procedures, meetings. All right. So when you get your HOA packet, you're going to have CCRs, you're going to have bylaws, and then some people add, which CCRs are restrictions, and I don't know. The verbiage, because I'm an old English teacher, is weird. So then you also have rules and regulations. That is the day-to-day rules, pool rules, parking rules, trash limits, paint, that kind of thing. All right. Um, the documents cannot conflict with each other, right? There can't be um, uh, in one document says the homeowner has the ability to pick paint, and then another document says all paint has to be eggshell. It can't conflict. All right, it has to be the same all through. So now that we understand what CCRs are, bylaws, rules and regulations on how they break down, and I'm gonna say it one more time because I know I'm talking fast and I need to slow down. All right, CCRs. They are the maintenance responsibility of the homeowners. All right, what an owner can and cannot do on the property. All right. That's why I say they can't. Yeah, I know some of you. I heard you. All right. And it is use restrictions of the property, what you can use the property for, what you can't use the property for, and enforcement of authority. Okay, those are your CCRs. Bylaws, voting, how members are elected, that kind of stuff. When meetings are taking place, those type of things, those are bylaws. Rules and regulations are the day-to-day rules, such as after 10 p.m. you can't have your music up loud, right? On Saturdays and Sundays you can't have your music loud, right? Those kind of things. You can't have a commercial van parked in your driveway, right? That kind of thing. I know, Trish, you and I talked about some of your HOA bylaws, and some of them made sense, right? Some of them make sense, and then some of them are just like, huh? What? Why do they do that? I know that HOAs have reasons and rhymes to things, and certain ones I don't understand, and probably that's because I've never lived in an HOA community. I live in a community that if I wanted, right now I got a camper in my yard, right? I got a camper in my yard. I've got a shed with purple shutters. I got purple door, right? Like, I like the color purple. So I've got all kinds of stuff. I have a really wild yard. If I lived in an HOA, that would not be able to happen. We mow our grass, right? But right now, I'm working on the yard trying to get it completely covered with creeping sage. That is not something that's allowed in an HOA. I know, Trish, I can't remember if you said it or if I heard it somewhere else. But one HOA said that you had to have St. Augustine grass. That's what that, it's like, it's very specific at the type of grass you put in. Why? They have a fiduciary responsibility to give the homeowners the home consistently market value the way they bought it, right? They cannot allow your neighbors to do something in their yard that depreciates the value of yours. So if you got St. Augustine grass, which is beautiful, right? But then you got crabgrass, which is not beautiful, right? First of all, grass is bad. I hate grass. But anyways, I digress. But it has to be based on those rules and regulations that you signed, right? All right. We understand this. Now let's go back to the purpose of Chapter 720. Purpose of Chapter 720 exists to define what an HOA is under Florida law. So this defines an HOA, sets boundaries on HOA power, protects homeowners' rights, and requires transparency and fairness. So remember I said earlier how they have to let you know, right? They have to let you know that there's going to be a meeting, or that there's going to be a vote, or there's a special assessment. They have to let you know these things, right? What Chapter 720 allows HOAs to do is they allow them to collect dues and assessments. You are paying them to keep up your community, right? They are being paid to make sure that that community 10 years from now looks exactly the way you bought it, right? So that's where your dues are. Maintain common areas. They are required to maintain common areas. Enforce governing documents. So that person next to you that's got a greenhouse and the rule says they can't have a greenhouse, HOA has to enforce that, right? They have to. Under law, they have to enforce that. They can issue fines when due process is followed. Okay? Due process means that they have given you warnings, they have issued fines, they have done everything they said they can do to you in the bylaws, right? Not the bylaws, the CCRs. They've said exactly that, and now they have to go a step further, right? HOAs must act within the authority granted by their documents and state law. They cannot say anything to you if it is not in those guidelines. You've seen those horror stories of like an HOA member going up to a house and is like, I don't like your flag, take it down, right? That's not appropriate, right? But the flag doesn't break any rule. That HOA member cannot do anything. That HOA member cannot give you a fine. It is not in the rule, right? So they are annoying. They can indeed be brought, you could go to a lawyer and go, this HOA member is harassing me, right? But they can't make up a rule all of a sudden. They can't say, oh, you've got, a daffodil flag and we only do daisies around here. Is that in the rules? Does that say somewhere in my documents? Show me in the documents. Show me where it says that. Right? If it doesn't, get off my lawn. Get off my lawn. My St. Augustine grass can't take your feet. Get off my lawn. All right. What does Chapter 720 not allow HOAs to do? They cannot random or do surprise fines, right? They can't just send you a thing saying you owe us $2,000. For what? You didn't give me due process. So I haven't done anything yet. You haven't given me due process. I don't know what this fine is for. They can't do that. They can't enforce without authority. All right? Meaning, if you haven't broken a rule, they can't say anything to you. No skipping notices or hearings. They cannot skip it. If we as the community say, hey, we need to get together with the HOA and we need to have a meeting, right? HOA can't skip that meeting. All right. No rules that conflict with state or federal laws. They cannot conflict with a state or federal law. HOAs cannot invent power that is not legally granted to them. That was my big one, was like, if it's not legal, they don't have it. Homeowner rights under Chapter 720. We know what HOAs can do and can't do. Now what can you do based on this law? Homeowners have the right to attend HOA board meetings. They cannot exclude you from an HOA board meeting. That transparency. Remember we talked about that earlier? That transparency. They have to be transparent with you. They are working for you. You are not working for them. They are working for you. Receive proper notice of meetings, right? I know, like I said, a lot of HOAs will send out emails and letters. I've heard some HOAs will actually do like phone trees, and they will call the residents. That was nowadays. I think a lot of them have Facebook pages, and they post it on the Facebook page, and like it's your responsibility to check it. No rules that conflict. Oh no, wrong. I said it was on the wrong note. Homeowners have the right to inspect a copy of official HOA records. So if you feel like they have mismanaged funds, you have the right to request what they've spent it on. You have a right to see the records of what they're doing for you, All right. I know we had somebody on here last week that was like, I'd love to know what they were spending my money on. That's the way you do it. You ask for the records. Let me see. Let me see what it was last year, right? Um, you have the right to receive notice of violations. This is why they can't just go ahead and give you a fee. They can't give you a fine all of a sudden, because you have the right to be notified that you're in violation. Some owners don't know that they're violated anything, right? You might live in an older phase of the community and not all the time things get enforced. That happens. And so now all of a sudden, there's a new board member that is trying to clean up the older phase. So they have to give everybody notices of that violation. They can't just go, oh, here's your fine. That's not how that works. You have the right to have a hearing before fines are imposed. Again, I talked about this last week. I had, very early on in my career, I had this couple that bought a home. And after the closing, we found out that they had received like their second notice for violation of paint, exterior paint. And we're like, hold up. They didn't even get the first violation. How are we to know that that was a thing? Long story short, they went in front of the board. The board was notified that they had just bought the house, yada yada. So they had to go through the process from beginning to end. My buyers ended up repainting the house anyways because they didn't like the color of the house. They had planned to do that anyways. It just wasn't in the immediate plans. They had to make it a little quicker than normal. So you have a right to a meeting, in front of the board before fines are imposed. You can challenge improper enforcement, right? So say you get that notification and you're like, again, they think my paint is peeling, and it's not peeling. I just had like this weird splotch of dirt on it and it looked like it was peeling. So you could go up in front of the board and be like, it's not. That's another reason why you get that chance to go in front of the board. If the board, again, like once you've gone in front of them and they still want to enforce it, you have the right to get a repeal. Go ahead and ask for another meeting. Homeowners are members of the association, not subjects of the association. You are a member. That means your voice, your opinion, your ideas count. So make your voice heard. Make sure you're there. How HOA fines must work. All of the following are required. Okay? If you've been fined, they have to give you written notice of the violation first, time to correct the issue, a hearing before a fining committee. Okay? So you've got to have a hearing, and fines within legal limits. All right? No hearing means no fine. If you've not been in front of the board members, they can't give you a fine yet. You have to be in front of the board members. Now you can't just keep dipping, all right? That doesn't work that way. They can get you for that. Don't do that. Go in front of the board, all right? Money dues and assessments. Jackie, if you're here, if you were watching, I know you were asking about money dues and assessments last week. Chapter 720 does regulate that as well. How assessments are calculated, how dues are collected, when special assessments are allowed, how liens are placed for unpaid assessments, financial transparency and requirements. Those are all things that are guided by Chapter 720. HOA finances must follow clear rules and reporting standards. Again, why? Because you can request that. If you don't like, something's up and you're like, wait a minute, I'm paying a lot of money and I ain't seeing nothing around here. I need to see your paperwork. Let me see those records, right? They have to keep good records so that way when you request them, they can hand off those records. All right. Meetings and votings and elections. Chapter 720 requires open board meetings. Again, you are able to go. As a homeowner, you are a member, right? So they can't exclude you. You're not a subject, you're a member. They are not kings and queens. You are not their peasant. You are a part of that court, okay? So you get to go. You get to have your voice heard, all right? Fair voting procedures, right? They have to have fair voting procedures. It can't be like, okay, we're all going to vote at 5 a.m. How many of y'all are up at 5 a.m., right? Some of us are up at 5 a.m., but not everybody's up at 5 a.m. Some people might work late. So they have to have fair voting requirements. Transparent elections. They've got to spell it out for you. Who's being elected and why. Legal consequences for fraudulent voting. So they are required to make sure that there's no fraudulent voting going on. HOA governance must follow democratic principles. And when we use the word democratic here, what we're talking about is democracy, which is meaning we vote. We are my brain went, we ain't saying this word. We are a society that we vote on what is good for the whole, right? That's what we vote on, what's good for the whole. So that's basically what they're saying, is that they have to act that way. They have to not come down as monarchs. They have to come down and be like, all right, we're all voting on this. Who agrees, right? Knights of the Round Table. Think of that. All right. Disputes and enforcement. Chapter 720 says that this law encourages mediation and alternative resolution. All right. So a lot of it is you have to try to mediate between the HOA and the homeowner first. If that fails, that's when we go on to different things. Fair enforcement of procedures. Again, they can't say you can't have a purple mailbox, but your neighbor has a purple mailbox, right? Okay, if you're going to get on to me, you got to get on to them, right? And I think that's a lot of some of the disputes with HOAs, is that you've got one person that gets knocked for something, and then they start looking around to everybody that has that same issue to kind of defend their own, and then that gets everybody else in trouble. So court is not the first stop whenever possible, though. All right, that's the biggest thing. We want to try to mediate between. What Chapter 720 does not decide, it does not decide exact paint colors. It does not decide pet limits. It doesn't decide the parking specifics. Those are all things that the community decides upon. Those details come from your HOA documents. All right. Chapter 720 ensures that they are enforced legally. All right. What are the most common, and this is what everybody's been waiting for. I know. What are the most common HOA guidelines here in Polk County? You ready? All right. The top 10 most common HOA guidelines here in Polk County are: 1, exterior appearance standards. That St. Augustine grass, right? The color of the mailbox, the color of your house, not having oil spills on your driveway, like those things. Those things are very common for an HOA. Why? Because they're protecting the market value of your house. I understand that. It can be annoying. I know, right? Super annoying. It's the reason why I don't live in an HOA. But they are protecting the value of your home. The value of my home can fluctuate wildly based on who, I say wildly, I'm being overly dramatic, but it can fluctuate, right, based on what the neighbors have, right, what my road condition looks like, what my own house looks like, right? So their HOA has to make sure that they can keep you the market value of your house. So exterior appearance. Architectural approval for modifications. That's so big. That's a lot of words, right? All that means is that if I want to add a room, I will need to get HOA approval sometimes, right? I have read guidelines. By the way I got these is I actually read through about 10 different HOA guidelines and bylaws that I could find in the MLS, and this was what they came up with. What I've seen for the architectural part is like there's some that say, hey, you can't convert your garage into a den or a bedroom. Can't do that. Can't have a mother-in-law suite. So there's certain ones. I know that I sold to a person that is living in a nature preserve, and it's very, very, it's not an HOA, but it is a deed restricted community with covenants, right? So that means there are things that they're not allowed to do because they live in that nature preserve. And architecture and building is one of them. They have to look at what materials you're using so that way it doesn't hurt the nature that you're living in, right? Okay. Landscaping and lawn maintenance, they can dictate, and I've seen, like I said, several of these that St. Augustine grass. There's a couple that tell you exactly how high your grass can get, which I thought was insanity. But again, I like wild yards, so that was just crazy to me, but that's who I am. Parking rules. So some of them say you can only have 2 cars in your driveway. Some say there's no parking on the road, right? Some communities I've seen have a common parking place for like guests, and your guests have to walk to get to your house. That was very common. And all that I've read, there are a lot of different ones that have restrictions on parking. What kind of vehicles can be parked in your driveway? Commercial vehicles, number one. Commercial vehicles of any kind, they either have to be in the garage and unseen, or they have to be parked somewhere not near your house. You cannot have a commercial vehicle in your home residence. There are vehicle restrictions, like I said, the commercial one. Pet policies, dog breed restrictions. There were leash, like your dogs had to be on leash. There were pet waste. Some of these make sense to me, right? Like pet waste. I don't want to go for a walk in my community and step in dog poop, all right? I do not want to step in dog poop. I will throw up. I will throw up. I think that was fair. That's fair. And that is a very common one, is like, how do you pick up? My thought, though, was, why do we have to make that a rule? Why do we have to make that a rule that you pick up your dog's poop, right? If your dog poops in a common area, pick it up, throw it away. Almost every place has some type of doggy poop receptacle. That shouldn't have to be a rule, y'all, but that means it's a rule because it was such a problem. They were like, what we got to do? We got to make a rule. So some of these were dumb to me because it seems more like common sense, if that, right? Okay. Noise and quiet hours were a common one as well. A lot of it was the noise could not be heard by your neighbors anywhere from 9 to 10 o'clock at night until 9 to 10 a.m. in the morning, right? So you've got a 12-hour period that your neighbors couldn't be disturbed by noise. So if you had a party, you couldn't play loud music to where your neighbors could hear it. Even if your party got rambunctious, right? They just were loud. That could be considered a breaking of the rule. So that was a very common one. Trash and recycling rules, such as you couldn't have your trash can at the road the whole time. You couldn't have your recycling bin at the whole time. That was a big one. Rental and leasing restrictions were a big one. I see a lot of communities that restricted short-term rentals. So you cannot live in that HOA and Airbnb your house. Ain't gonna be a thing. So if you're looking to buy a house to rent and it is in an HOA community, that is something you need to let your real estate agent should know your goals. And when they are looking for you a house, at least I would look at the HOA guidelines to make sure that that fits before we see it, right? But always double check for yourself, because some people are not as anxious as I am. I say my anxiety is a superpower a lot of times, because it makes me look at things, because my brain goes, but what if? So my anxiety is a little bit of a superpower. And last one is use of common areas. So pool, like how many guests you could bring to the pool, the clubhouse, like the deposit for the clubhouse, the rules for the clubhouse, those kinds of things. That was what the use restriction of common areas. If you had a dog park, I've seen a lot of communities now, though a lot of the ones that I were looking at, they have dog parks, and I thought that's really super cool. But they have what you can't do at a dog park. So I thought that was neat. But those are the top 10 here in Polk County. Bottom line, when we talk about HOAs, Chapter 720 is Florida's HOA guardrail law. It limits HOA power, protects homeowner rights, requires transparency, ensures fairness. CC and Rs create the rules. Chapter 720 makes sure those rules are follow the law. All right, they make sure that it doesn't infringe upon your rights. Knowledge is protection. Read the documents. Read your documents. They matter. This guide is for educational purposes. All right. So, my lovelies, I went over quite a bit. All right. Gail, you said because there's always that one entitled person who thinks they don't have to clean up after their animal. Exactly. I think a lot of these HOA rules and laws came because we have people that are inconsiderate, right? They don't think of others. They don't think about, like, the noise law, right? One of the things that here in my neighborhood, we have cars that drive by with really loud radios, right? They'll drive past the house and you can even hear like the windows kind of shake from the bass. I have a brain issue, right? I have something called idiopathic intracranial hypertension. What does that mean? That means I got a bunch of fluid in my head and it causes daily headaches. And when I hear the bass, guess what? My head hurts, right? If I lived in an HOA, that it might not be as big of an issue as I have here. But it's because when we talk about people creating rules, it's because we don't think about everybody else. And a lot of times that's because it's not something that's happening personally to us. We're not personally working at night, right? So we don't know at 9 a.m. we need to be psh, because everybody else is awake. But our neighbor just worked at the hospital for 16 hours. And now they're trying to sleep, right? And you're loud. HOA rules kind of make people do the right thing sometimes. Can people get overzealous about that? Yes, absolutely. 110%. That's the right word. It just takes one inconsiderate person to make a new rule. Yes. Yeah, really it does. Gail, you are younger than me, but when I was growing up, we started seeing all these like warning signs on things that made no sense. Like, don't put your blow dryer near the sink. Don't put it near water. Duh, it's electricity, right? But somebody did, somebody got hurt, right? The coffee warning, right? One, read up on the McDonald's coffee. It is not what everybody else says it is. It's a really interesting story and crazy. But we now have coffee warnings. The coffee is hot, right? that started to be a thing when I was younger. And I think it's because people don't always think about things. They're not always considerate. They don't think ahead. So we've had to make rules to protect people. That fiduciary responsibility. Some people get on power trips. I'm not going to lie. Some people take that. They get on the HOA board and they're like, everyone must bow to my will, right? But Chapter 720 protects them from going too far. So make sure you look up Chapter 720. If you're interested in any more of this information, by all means, we can sit down and we can have a chat. If you want to give me a call, we can talk. If you're local and you want to have a cup of coffee, I love me some coffee, all right? Gail can tell you that. Gail's been my best friend for a long time. She can tell you how much I love coffee, all right? So I love me some coffee. If you want to sit down and have coffee and talk about this, we can talk about this. Next Tuesday, we are going to go over the market numbers. We were going to do that today, but HOA kind of bled into today, so I have to put it off until next Tuesday. That's fine. That's okay. Market numbers, by the way. I'm getting excited, y'all. I've heard so many doom and gloom, so much doom and gloom from people. They're like, the market's crashing. It's making my eye twitch. I've got some good numbers coming, all right? So I can't wait to share those with you next Tuesday. So make sure that you come back next Tuesday at 8 p.m. for another True Talk Tuesday. And until then, what do I say? Be happy, be safe, and know that I love you. Because if people can hate for no reason, I can love for no reason. All right, my lovelies. All right, my lovelies. I'll see you next Tuesday where we talk about numbers.